Folks, welcome back to another episode of the IMGPH podcast. And today we're taking you to the world of computer science, startups, and obviously public health. Our guest today has earned a Bachelor's of Science in Math and Computer Science, a Master's in Computer Science and Engineering from MIT. But that's not all. This person has also achieved an MS in Robotics from Carnegie Mellon University and a PhD in Artificial Intelligence from the School of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Washington. Now, you might be thinking I'm talking to a computer, but no. Before all these degrees come into play, this person is actually deep in the world of public health. And our guest is not only a startup founder and CEO at Zordi, which is building autonomous greenhouses with robots to deliver high-quality local produce to the world. This guest advises multiple students as well at NYU through the Entrepreneurial Lab and the Business School. You're probably thinking, I can't wait to hear all about this. Gilwoo Lee, welcome to the IMGPH podcast. We're glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, that intro to me, when even reading it and thinking about it and typing it out for you was, wow, how did someone do so much and end up in this direction? So I would love to hear about your path in academia. You know, what made you choose all these degrees? How did you start? The student that's probably watching this right now saying, I don't know where to go with my life, but I have these interests. How did you form your own path and direction?
Yeah, definitely. So when I started my undergrad, I had like a single mission, which for myself, which is that, okay, I got to really find out what I really like. And I gave myself sort of about 10 years, and meaning I felt like I need to try a bunch of different things to really find out what I'm passionate about, what I'm really good at. So I was pretty good at trying new things and jumping into new things, and essentially also sometimes good at quitting when I knew that, oh, this is definitely not my path. So, but coming into undergrad, I knew that I was interested in mainly two things. One was either movies or media, or the second one was AI and robotics. So
what a difference.
They're different, but I think there were two kind of one overlapping theme, which was that it had to be something visual and physical. And both of those, I felt like they have the power to reach everybody in the world. Like that's the power of movie, media, or that's the power of AI and robotics and technology. So I was really drawn to those things. By kind of being at MIT, I was naturally exposed to robotics and AI stuff from early on, but also spent a lot of my kind of time outside of MIT interning and working in the movie industry from sophomore, and which led me to internship at Disney Animation Studios. And my first job, full-time job, was actually at DreamWorks Animation. So I was in the Kung Fu Panda 2. So if you wait forever in that movie ending credit, you'll see my name there. So that's kind of my first path. And then, so I actually from between undergrad and MIT and master's, there was about 3 to 4 year gap where I was trying a lot of things in the movie industry, and then eventually led me to actually help my friend start a startup. And then between those two, I started realizing, I actually really like solving technical problems and wanted to go back to MIT and start the other journey in the robotics and AI. That's why I ended up kind of going back and got my master's degree. And then it was just too fun. I didn't actually plan in continuing with like a PhD. It was just that the robotics was just so fun. And I realized, I need more than just a year and a half in my master's degree to learn more about these robots and how to apply AI in robotics. So I applied for a PhD program, and that's kind of how I started at CMU, Carnegie Mellon, and then ended up kind of finishing my degree at the University of Washington.
Wow. You mentioned this one thing, it seems very easy when you say it like that, and I'm sure you went through a lot, right? There was this key thing you mentioned about quitting. I know when to quit. For some people, they have that word called FOMO, or that term called FOMO, or, I don't know what I don't know. Maybe I hold on to this. How do you have that certainty feeling inside of you that this is not for me?
I think there's one thing that I realized, and that was actually through maybe talking to some of my friends that are really good at sticking to a job. And I do mean that I think that's also really valuable talent to have. And now that I've found my passion, I've been doing this for now 10 plus years. So it's not to say that, you always got to quit soon. But for me, it was more that I had and I still do have a pretty firm belief that I have everything I need in terms of my talent, grit, and maybe a little bit of luck to achieve the things that I really want to achieve. And that comes with the right amount of intelligence. I really love solving problems. I really love meeting people and convincing people to build things together. So I had that firm belief that made me less afraid about quitting something not when it wasn't working out. I think it was always, I was achieving things in that path as well, but more when I realized, I saw where this path is going, and I started to realize that that's not what I want to achieve. Spend the rest of my maybe next 10 years of my life, and maybe feeling less excited about the intellectual challenges that are coming up with this path. So, with the firm belief that I have the ability to achieve things that I wanted, and then with the desire to really find what I really want to do, because that when you combine those two things, your ability and your passion, that's where your kind of full power comes in. I was willing to both jump into new things and then ready to move on when I thought I learned everything I needed and tried everything that I needed in that path to get to the next thing.
And so you had this inherent feeling or a passion that this is my passion. This is where I want to explore my curiosity. So I'm going to invest my time into this. It was a decision, and you kind of followed your heart is the generic way of saying it.
Yes, definitely. So, for example, I spent 3 years in the movie/media industry trying different things, and I genuinely enjoyed, and I still have very deep respect in people in that industry. So I started by being a technical staff in a big movie company and being part of a movie, which was awesome. And I'm still very proud of that. And then that led me to kind of the one thing that I always have whenever I'm in a new industry that I'm really curious about, what are the leaders of this industry doing? So immediately when I started in that kind of the bottom role, tiny role in DreamWorks, I was looking for, who's the senior most person that's leading the technology here? What are they doing?
Wow.
And then I was also looking into, who's the creative producer here? What are they doing? And who's the one who's putting the money to make these things? So I was really curious about it. And I wasn't really choosing a job position that would necessarily lead me to take a path, but I was always asking or trying to get into a position that lets me see the bigger picture as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the movie Kung Fu Panda 2, I signed up for a position in the lighting team, mainly because that's the team where the final frames get made. So I do get to see just a whole process of the movie making, at least in the kind of the day-to-day. And then I was I really want to see the bigger picture, the decision making. So then I got a job in Korean movie industry where the company invests in making movies. That means as the bottommost person in that company, I actually get to interface with the movie producers and directors as my day-to-day job, because that's what I'm kind of reporting to my company, how this movie is being made. So I got to see the full picture of how these movies get funded, what are the directors, how do the directors make decisions, and after going through a lot of them, I kept doing it for about 3 years because I was so passionate about it. And then I finally realized, I still find it really fun, but there's a little bit of the intellectual mismatch in terms of what I love just in terms of problem solving and then what this industry needs. So that's kind of why I decided to move on. Yeah, I think that's about it.
It's so interesting to see how process of movie showed you love for process but lack of intellectual understanding or feeling around it kind of took you to the next step. So you liked the process of problem solving and making those decisions and structure, and you took that same structure and applied it into a
to like entrepreneurship.
completely different industry.
But the key thing that was missing there was that I was pretty quick to realize I don't have the artistic creativity talent. I don't really enjoy like doing those things. But that's the key kind of gem that I really liked about movie making. However, I liked the process and the kind of how the things get funded and how people work together there, which I think is like a big part of being a startup founder. What I really missed in the process was doing math and computer science and physics and all these things I really loved doing as an engineer. So that drew me back into kind of MIT and learning robotics.
You found an interest in robotics, and that's what took you into the world of robotics after that.
Right. So initially, just as an undergrad, I was interested in both. And then after kind of spending enough of my time and exploration in the movie industry, I definitely learned everything I wanted and needed in terms of just like how to build a company, how to work with multiple different people from different different background. But I really wanted to go back to something that's a little bit more technical that I really like, which was in like robotics and AI.
The PhD was something that you used to expand and going deep into a subject, since you didn't find a year and a half to 2 years being enough. So after that PhD, how did Zordi come to life? What was that whole process like?
Yeah, so it was actually maybe around the 4th and 5th year of my PhD that I started getting a little bit frustrated about what I want to do next. I still really, really like doing robotics. I really, really like doing research, but I knew that there was just something missing in terms of my fit in working in a big company as a research scientist. So I interned at back then it was Facebook Reality Lab, and I really enjoyed working with amazing postdocs. Everybody knew so much more about the field of like AI, generative AI, or virtual reality. So it was genuinely fun, but I felt like the thing that I didn't quite enjoy was just being part of a really big org and making relatively smaller contribution in terms of just advancing the things that I'm working on. And I felt very similar things even when I was working in DreamWorks. And I think that's kind of maybe something that some people genuinely love, because the nice thing about working in these big technology company or big kind of movie company is that the things you do end up just getting out to a lot of people. I did a 1 minute sequence in Kung Fu Panda 2, but that still got to be viewed by millions of people, right? So that's one exciting part of it. But for me, the impact that I could bring day to day to this org and our final outcome was a lot more important, rewarding. So I knew that despite me really enjoying the research aspect, I needed to take more ownership in the things that I do. So I got a little bit frustrated, the mismatch. So I told my advisor for the first time in my 5th year, I said, I need to take probably 2 weeks off. I feel a little bit lost. And this was the first time that I ever took vacation in my PhD. And I went back to Korea and met a ton of my friends, mentors that I've met in my past life, outside before I started my PhD. And the amazing thing was that, so I met them I've been keeping in touch, but this was like after maybe 5 years. A lot of them have already started their own thing. Like the person who was leading a movie making team in a big corp now got his own movie studio. Things like that. So I was like very enlightened by their ability to start their own thing and kind of putting their talent and energy and creativity to build something that they really like. So I came back after that 2 week and told my advisor, said, I think I'm going to quit my PhD and start my own company. So I was almost about to quit and start my own company. And back then, I haven't even decided what to start. It was more that I was fully committed and enthusiastic about starting my own company. Luckily, my advisor has had a co-founding experience and was well connected with the VC world, the investment world, and he just gave me like really good advice on let's wrap it up. You have only you already know what you want to write about your thesis. Let's start exploring startup ideas together. So he helped me kind of transitioning into starting my own company without quitting.
Without quitting, yeah, the step-by-step process.
Exactly.
It seems like you put yourself in situations where you're learning exactly what the goals are, and you're around great mentors that are also advising you at the same time while staying in a structured path, which in that case was a PhD or education. So you kind of you're like an octopus with multiple arms, but it's like there's still a solid foundation or a core to that thing.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a lot of people, I've spoken to some people recently. They're in their 20s or even teenage years, and they feel like they're too old. And then there's some people in their late 20s that they feel they're too old. And there's some people that are in their late 30s and they feel they're too old. When you say all the experience you have done, it feels like a lifetime so far. And I'm asking this question from the perspective that how do you, is it ever too late? Like, do you feel like you're wasting time ever? Or how do you be more intentional about it? Because for you, you're very clear, right? But 3 years in movie production and movie studios is a long time for knowing that you went into this path, but it's a step by step. So these are intentional steps that in hindsight, did they feel intentional to you when you were making them, or you didn't know what you were getting into as well?
I certainly didn't know what I was getting into. And even though like I gave myself as an undergrad, like starting undergrad, like maybe roughly 10 years, truthfully knowing myself, if it took me 20 years, I probably would have done it. So for me,
wow.
I think I never feel too old to start something that I feel really important and passionate about. The one thing that I try to do, still learning how to build the habits, is to try to keep healthy and keep learning and stay focused to be able to continue doing things that I love and continue not being afraid to start new things. And it could be, depending on the experience that I accumulate so far in the next 10 years, it could be starting a new company, it could be starting a new venture capital, or it could be, helping others with different type of things. But yeah, I never think that there's any time where it's like too late to start something that you really love.
So yeah, you're saying stick in it. It's never too late type of mentality. I guess that's the answer. It's just it's so interesting to hear that this is a heavy time commitment, and it still feels like you're getting started and you're in it to win it type of thing. But if you didn't do that, you wouldn't have got there. Tell me about your startup. What is Zordi? How does it influence public health? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, so at Zordi, we're building a sustainable future for everyone with robotic, autonomous greenhouses. Our goal is to make these fresh, sustainable, locally grown food available to everybody in the world, starting with metropolitan areas, and make that affordable as we scale. And the reason why we started this with this concept is that with climate change and labor challenges, we need to find more climate resilient, sustainable ways to grow fresh produce. And growing is only one part of it. Delivering is another big part of the total carbon footprint that's coming out of this whole process in agriculture. So by being local and by enabling local production through greenhouses and more automation, you make the fresh produce a lot more available to the local population and really ensure regional food security, and also make the farms a lot more I would say rich or more profitable, because you're really skipping the middle process and you get to really sell or deliver directly to your retail partners, or maybe depending on the farm, it could be directly to consumers.
Got it. I want, I've heard this before from you in our conversations before. How did this startup come to life? What was that moment that you had that said, I want to start something like this?
Yeah, so I've been always interested, just as outside of my academia, very curious about sustainability and how me as a person or as someone who's building a company do something that's related to sustainability, which is ultimately related to everyone's health, right? Public health. This was 2020. It was in the middle of the first, I think, phase of COVID. So everyone was kind of stuck in most of their homes for most of the days. And this was around the summertime, where we also had a wildfire, and this was just getting worse and worse every year. We had about 10 days where we were supposed to really not get out of the house at all as much as possible, or you had to really wear masks to just protect yourself from the dust. And I was Googling like when this is going to end, and the sky was still pretty smoky, and I saw that I was in Seattle, and the ocean, the beach was full of baked clamshell because of the wildfire and everything, creating a heat dome. And then it was like getting rotten. I was like, this is like so real and tangible to my life. I gotta start something that enables, and it's directly related to the food that I love, like seafood and fresh produce. I gotta do something that addresses this over time as we scale. And coincidentally, I was already kind of reviewing what we can do in agriculture and what can automation do. And this kind of really clicked in terms of my passion and commitment, and really the strong desire to solve this as part of my mission.
The clams were baking and your mind was baking at the same time.
Exactly. I was like, I gotta solve this or I'm gonna lose all the fresh, food that I really love.
So if you can explain what the process is like of how Zordi does it, but explain it like you were explaining it to a 4-year-old. What would that look like? So how does this happen inside the autonomous greenhouse setting that you have created?
As in like how the greenhouses operate.
Yeah, how they operate. How is produce created in that environment? How do you do that?
So greenhouses are relatively new in the US, but just from the history of agriculture, it's actually more like 100-plus-year-old system to extend seasons and make generally the production more climate resilient. So we use hydroponic systems. We use what's called drip irrigation, which is just an autonomous watering system that could be connected to the sunlight intensity of the day or soil moisture. So it uses those sensor-based data to precisely water at the right time for the plants. And then there's also generally environmental control systems in the greenhouse that cools the greenhouse when needed by ventilation, or warms the greenhouse depending on what you have. Typically in the US, natural gas is one of the available options. So there's a lot of autonomous environmental kind of temperature control, moisture control, irrigation, watering, all happening at the same time. And then the watering is designed to give the plants not just water, but nutrition, right? So there is a nutrition mixing tank that puts in nitrogen and all these other chemicals that really the plants need to grow them. So that's the basics of a hydroponic greenhouse. Now, it still requires a ton of expertise to grow them well. Like if you asked me, and even now, without our technology, I'll be failing in growing these crops well. Typically, it takes decades of experienced farming to grow fresh produce successfully in greenhouses. So what we do at Zordi is to really eliminate or reduce the need for horticultural experts to be on site and making key decisions day to day with our monitoring robot and our AI, which provide really dense understanding of the crop health everywhere and produces day-to-day the action items that need to be happening at the farm, including changing the nutrition, changing the temperature control, all of those, but as well as any kind of crop care activities, for example, harvesting. The other last piece here is that now that you got decisions made with our AI, somebody's got to execute it. And that's another big part of what we are building. You can't really deploy these greenhouses wherever you want unless you are able to reduce the labor meaningfully, significantly, to the point that you don't really have to worry too much about managing a big crew. Here we started with harvesting robot that harvests and grades immediately and packs the berries, which is our first fruit, into packages that typically ends up reducing the manual labor by about 40 to 60%. So with that, we really get to complete the full picture of scouting and monitoring, understanding what the plants need, making decisions with the AI, and doing a significant portion of the manual labor with our automated systems, including our harvesting robots. And the really nice thing is actually it comes back to the scouting robot in terms of checking whether things got done properly and whether the crop is growing properly. So there's a full circle, which basically these days, the level of information that we get through the system is so much dense that I think we're definitely getting to the level of superhuman level monitoring and superhuman level AI between all of these three things.
So if I were to explain it, horticulture expert is someone that's an expert in farming?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So if I were to explain it to a 4-year-old, there's 3 roles and all the roles are run by robots right now.
Robots and AI.
Robots and AI. Role number 1 is the scouter that's assessing everything. So it's a robot that's scouting everything. Role number 2 is the manager that's looking the expert, and hopefully the machines will start making superhuman-like decisions in the moment, so produce can flourish or they can pick a certain direction. And then there's the mechanical robot that's actually working and doing the farming.
Correct. Right.
Inside this big
the greenhouse.
And how would you what is a greenhouse exactly, if you were to describe it?
So greenhouses, there's a spectrum, but most common types are essentially big metal structures with transparent films. Like the film could be glass or polyfilm or some kind of new materials that let the sunlight go in. So it's really more of started with the idea of let's protect the plants. And sometimes, depending on the crop, some of these greenhouses are super basic. They're just really providing a cover.
Yeah.
Sometimes, depending on the crop and the region, they're a lot more resilient. They have like inflated materials, or they have like glass material for better transparency. Essentially, it's a very simple structure that protects the crops.
Do you find these in terms of the future of Zordi, but let's take it into public health, the future of agriculture and how we are going to consume food? Where do you see this going? Because you have created this entire business, which is your heart, soul, life, and even the soul of the robots to some degree is in this. What is the future of agriculture? Where do you see it going? Is this going to be a necessity or a requirement? And you mentioned climate change and all those things that are happening.
Yeah, I definitely see greenhouses being essentially a necessity for fresh produce. And more countries will definitely be needing those and utilizing those. There will be different types of greenhouses that are being available for different regions, for sure, and making them a lot more climate resilient per that region. And I also think that given the advancement of AI and robotics and also just challenges in labor, in 20 years, most of the farms will be using some kind of AI and robotics. So combining these two, the climate resilience and regional food security, sustainability that greenhouses provide relative to field, and the ability of AI and robot to really boost the way of farming, I do think that robotic greenhouses will be everywhere a lot more than what we expect to see in the next 10 years.
So you sense that I wouldn't call this a success because technically this is a need that's come out of some type of issue in the world. But a success for a project like this seems to be 10 to 20 years away for us, where this is going to become mainstream, if you will.
Yes. So for us, whether it's through Zordi or Zordi's partners or just Zordi's robotics and AI technology, the success for us is really enabling sustainable, better food available to everywhere. And essentially what I want is for you or anybody to walk into a grocery store and see a Zordi inside product or a Zordi branded product and be able to comfortably say that, oh, this is probably grown in the most sustainable way and delivered sustainable way. And I think it's going to be really high quality product. I've tasted them before. I can buy this here. And, the product that we get in New York City is not too different from what I get in Jackson, Tennessee. And they're both like local. That's the result that I'd be really excited about.
Wow. How do you think so this will become as a subject of environments changing, and then people will automatically like it's kind of like right now what we say organic grown in this farm, but then eventually that would be replaced with grown in a Zordi greenhouse.
Grown in Zordi greenhouse, grown in local greenhouses, I think those will definitely be the more of a new organic or new way of farming that people appreciate more. I think people will soon, and they're already getting educated, I think, just by buying those products, that they're better, they have longer shelf life because they're local and they're grown in hydroponic systems and in a very clean way, and that they're more sustainable, sometimes even compared to organic farms.
Who are your main customers right now? So who are the people you're interacting with? Are they mainly kind of like a Wegmans for you, or is it something that they're chefs as well are talking to you? Do you talk to people in the world of nutrition, the people that have influence on food and dishes, restaurants?
A little bit of both, but our main customer base that we are trying to network more and understand more are definitely bigger grocery retail partners like Wegmans, Whole Food, Walmart, all of those with big grocery section. And then occasionally we definitely engage with some chefs and try to get some feedback as well. But in the end, we're trying to really feed the world and make it more available at scale. So we are trying to understand that customer base as much as possible.
You mentioned the world, and something that came to my mind was there's a lot of countries that have, and I'm sure you might have been asked this question before, where there is a lack of access to food. Do you see this kind of a business or this kind of a model impacting those areas where there's no access to food as well?
Eventually, yes. I think, just knowing the near-term goals and midterm goals, and also just the impact that advanced countries have when it comes to how they get or source fresh produce, we will certainly be operating first in the more advanced countries where people are willing to pay for higher fresh produce. And the reason is not necessarily because we need to stay in premium, but also actually more because those are the countries where if you look at the global greenhouse gas and how much advanced countries are paying for transportation, they're willing to pay air freight things because their customers want it. And that's like a big part of the carbon footprint of these fresh produce. So I think actually it's more strategic and more sustainable to start with those countries and really work out, obviously, our unit economics to get to those other regions, even in those countries and in other countries where you're really enabling regional security for even for the low income population.
The way I see it, it's like these are health organizations of the world might be interested in this down the line, and
definitely, yes,
impacting certain areas where they send people or they try to send food, and now what if food can just be created over there in a local and healthy manner?
And that would be the most exciting kind of part of our scaling, the fact that we could get to that level of unit kind of economics of these farms to be self-sustainable as a business, and then be able to serve the regions where there's literally no food available, fresh produce available. That would be really exciting.
This is a dream essentially. It's your dream, and I'm also now I'm on the clouds of that dream, and I'm seeing it from the top-down view. What I'm curious to know is it is a dream, but it's a big machine that you're running. Your machines are a big machine that you have to run. How do you? What is it? Let's go into the day in the life of a startup thing, and perhaps let's start with what you tell the students at NYU when you come here or you speak to them. What are common questions you get asked about running a startup and things like that? What are answers you usually give in that world?
So typically, I think maybe I'll start by describing my usual days or weeks. So typically for us, we have pretty clear long-term goal and midterm, near-term goals. So But we do a lot of things as a startup at the same time. There's a team building and testing robots, team building AI, and a team literally growing fresh produce. So a big part of my job is to make sure that everybody continues to understand what everybody else is working on and why they're working on it, and understand the contribution each other's making to build the whole thing together. Because otherwise, you as a single kind of person really busy working, 60, 70 hours per week will just feel a little bit like maybe exhausted or burnt out, not seeing the progress that we've made so far, or not seeing the near term kind of goals that we're going to achieve together, or even the longer ones. So that's a big part of it, as in like I make sure that there are enough but not too many meetings where those things are being kind of communicated, and then also meeting with new investors and really kind of sharing our vision and convincing them, or new partners, to start kind of selling our fresh produce, or selling, potentially, partnering for technology. The NYU program that I am involved in is called EFL, and it's really for NYU's the startup founders, entrepreneurs, to connect with NYU students, but also to the investors and mentors in the Northeast. So really, I would say 80-90% of it is actually I get a ton of mentorship and advice and really energy by being in this network. Startup is a long journey. And nobody really knows what a successful startup in this particular thing that I'm building should look like. So I learn a ton by getting advices from the mentors, investors, and the NYU's resource network. Now, another portion of it that I'm also very grateful to have is to interact with NYU students. Most of them are either going through the MBA program, or kind of connected with this particular program. So they're computer science, engineering, and master's students who's part of this program. And typically, I think they are very interested in startups. That's why they joined this program, and either as a willing to be a founder, or willing to join a early stage startup after they finish their program. So most of those conversations are really more about, why did I start this company? What is it like to start kind of what is it like to build a company, or what is it like to build the team, or what should they expect if they were to join a startup? Because I think starting a company versus joining an early stage startup are two kind of very different experiences, even though you're both kind of building the same, a really great thing together. So I try to be as practical and maybe also honest in those questions.
For the students that and a lot of people are now going to Google this program, probably, especially the startup ones that are interested. What would you tell those students that are looking this up, or might not even have access to that program right now? And what is it like to start a startup?
Yeah, so the NYU EFL program is an accelerator program that's designed for companies that just started. So I think we were in that program, we're a little bit more mature than many other companies. There are sometimes founders that just started with an idea, or they just have a patent and they're converting that into an idea. And so I think it's great for students that have some ideas and have something more tangible to start looking into this type of a program, because you'll get a ton out of that. I think it's a little bit different, say, for those who are just kind of exploring the ideas. EFL is best when you already at least have something to start with, or already have a company, just started a company, for example. So it's sort of the next stage. If you've already committed to start a company, you kind of have an idea, then you can be part of this program to really expand further.
So yeah, I mean, the public health student that's thinking of starting a company, what is that whole process like? Take us back to day one, Gilwoo, that started Zordi.
I think it really depends a lot on the startup that you are looking to build, but I think it always starts with exploring a lot of ideas that about what you're passionate about and what you think would make money. Because I think startup is in the end a profit business. So there are a lot of amazing things with public health, and I think makes a lot more sense to maybe stay in nonprofit, and that's another path that you can do. And for example, I think the Gates and Bill and Melinda Foundation, I think they're like doing a lot of amazing stuff. But I think if you are really interested in joining a startup or starting a startup, then you really have to think about how will this scale? How will it eventually start making money? Is this going to be a startup that's backed by venture capitals, or is this going to be more like a company where you'll be slowly making money and actually eventually kind of getting big? Typically, the reason why I'm separating those out, like a VC funded businesses and something that's not a VC funded business, can take very different paths in terms of like scale up kind of curve. So those are just the key things that I think you don't have to decide in the beginning, but it's just something to learn about and think through. Because if you think that your idea is going to be more successful by having some sort of venture capital investments, then you really need to form it in a way that's convincing to those investors. And typically that's a very new process that I don't think as a student I was ever exposed to.
So expose that to students, VC versus self-funded or kind of taking your own path. One seems to have what is a VC, venture capitalist? How would you describe that? And then and I guess most people that are watching it and are starting might think, I want to do it myself. I don't want anyone as a part of my business is a standard one. So what is the importance of something like a VC? How does that work?
Yeah, and VCs can come at different stages of your company. So you could definitely start with a ladder. Like, I'm going to start my own thing and just keep solidifying my idea. And once I have some traction, whether that's, number of users or the revenue that I'm making, then I'm going to take it to venture capital. That's definitely a very valid path. The benefit of having a venture capital backed business is that you essentially have convinced a set of investors that there is a path that would scale up very quickly, and you're on the curve. Your vision is on that curve, and where you've identified and solved the key challenges associated with it. And as a result, once you are able to successfully convince them, you get early access to bigger capital. And typically once you're at the beginning of the curve, and especially with like these maybe harder problems that you want to solve. For example, for us, it's like we're trying to build robotic greenhouses. This is going to be pretty capital heavy. Or very common examples are like biotech. You may have the core technology, or you may be the expert in making that, but you still need money, right? So that's where the VCs, like having really good VCs or investors is super valuable. They bring you the capital that you need to build your dream quicker. And in return, you certainly, would be sharing some equity, but I think that's totally valuable depending on what you're pursuing.
Understood. And for those of you even more confused about that, just watch Shark Tank. It's basically what Gilwoo just described, but we're getting the real life experience. Let's probably ask a question they don't ask on Shark Tank. Or what does it take to be a startup? Like, what kind of a person should actually get into a startup? So if you're like this, I think the startup life is for you, and I think you saw that in yourself, so you decided, I'm going to take the startup route. What kind of a person should do a startup?
Yeah. I think one of the partners at Y Combinator, which is sort of like the EFL program in the Silicon Valley, made a very good point. There's maybe, less than 1% of global population who really, really, for them, startup or being an entrepreneur is like the only thing that makes sense to them. In that they really, really want or love having the ownership and being able to solve big problems and feel very passionate about that for many, many years. And maybe part of them, they don't want to follow like orders. Now, that's maybe another big part of their thing. For me, it was like, for some reason, I couldn't get myself passionate about being part of a big company. And it wasn't really about it wasn't that I wasn't excited about being part of a big movie. I'm still very proud and excited about it. It was just that day to day, I just couldn't be that excited. So I think there's definitely that type of personality in addition to really wanting to solve bigger problems. Those two need to be combined for you to be a startup entrepreneur founder. If you're really just the former, that's also totally fine. You may or may not be looking for a startup. You may be just looking for a really good business. My mom owns her own business. She loves doing it. She's not looking to expand or scale up. It's just that she likes that ownership. And my father was the same too. So there's that like an entrepreneurial kind of personality. And in addition, maybe the passion and willingness to solve bigger problems. I think those two combined make you a really exciting startup founder. Now, there's a second group. I think they could be really good at being a founder or being also really good at being really great at big companies. I think for them, they have more flexibility. And I think my guess is that those people may be really good at being a co-founding team because they also bring in a ton of typically expertise, energy, commitment. It's not that they lack those things. It's just that they have both options available. I think being a founder versus co-founding team, both of them are highly rewarding. It's really up to your personality and also just up to you finding the right partner. So I could have joined another company if I could. No, I should take that back. I don't think I could have joined another company. I think I definitely was someone who had to start my own company.
Yeah.
But I definitely have people in my company who I think are also very capable of starting their own company. And I'm really, really grateful to have them join me as a co-founding team. So I think you could be one of those people. And then there's a third group that are highly, highly talented. And I think a lot of NYU students are in doing really great, achieving really big things in established organizations. And that's also a really important part of, building the future together. So I think it's really important to understand your personality because it's not that one is better than the other. It's really more about where do you belong and where do you shine.
And then that goes back to the start of the podcast. You understand that by doing and putting yourself in experiences. In your case, that was the thing. Are there any other ways that you have seen work for people?
I've definitely seen. So a lot of my friends, especially my high school friends and college friends, are mostly on the other side, and they find me kind of amusing because they think that, and the way how they described it was that, Gilwoo, I really like, and they are really good in their org. I really like advancing in a structured environment. So I think, you should be able to tell by trying things. If you're more on the latter side in terms of just the talent and personality fit, you might be able to soon realize it after joining the company you love, right? Or if you're on the other side, then either you love, if you're more of a startup type and then joined a big company, then you'll probably soon realize, I really don't like this. Then you have the decision to make whether you're going to quit and start your own company or join a startup, or kind of stay there and try to find your ways in that org. And I think that's kind of the point that you're making earlier, as in a lot of people are hesitant to quit. And I think that's the key maybe difference between people who are joining or starting startups or people who are not doing that.
I think that term is called entrepreneur versus intrapreneur. Mm-hmm. Intrapreneur is an internal entrepreneur in a way. So you can be an entrepreneur
for sure.
If you don't want to build that structure but want to serve your talents in a place.
Definitely.
Gilwoo, one last area where do you see the startup landscape in the world of public health going? So you're a big contributor, or this is your world now. What are other startups? You feel like public health is a big area for startups to come into right now?
Definitely. I must admit that because my startup is a lot more closely related to agriculture, not everybody that I interact with is exposed to or doing something that's directly addressing public health. That said, I think a lot of those two areas in public health is getting really strong push because it tends to be the area that gets most impacted by climate change to some degree, and also just availability of fresh water. A lot of those things are just kind of related to both agriculture and public health. And then there are also a lot of exciting advancements in AI and generative AI and also just biotech. That's also related to public health. So I think there are, maybe my guess is that there's more to come in public health startups in terms of how to make it profitable and scalable. I think there are very few successful companies that are in the public health space that's well known to the world as, oh, this company built something amazing that's like saving the world, right? I think there are definitely a lot of interest and a lot of new funds that are created to directly and address public health, and which will naturally kind of flow into more startups.
I'm loving this. Wow. All right, let's ask you. You've given us words of wisdom. Maybe you realize it or didn't, but your whole story is a testament to the amazing work you're doing and what's coming next for you. And I wish you nothing but success, and I'm sure success is already coming your way, based on the things you're about to do even after this podcast as well. If for the student that's getting started on their journey or midway through their journey, or someone that's failed in their life as well and wants to get back, some words of wisdom you'd leave with them right now that you always hear, like what's the one thing that you remind yourself about regularly?
There were definitely times in my life where I didn't always like wake up with that, but having a strong belief in your own ability to be positive and to have the right talent, I think that's the first thing that is really important for everyone. And I think someone might be going through a phase of their life that they can't be grateful of everything that's happening to them. For me, when I was going through those, I kind of imagined myself as being a really good surfer, having a really big surfboard. And the thing that I'm really good at is maybe in the middle of turbulence, I'm just, surfing. And eventually you'll get out of it and be part, and you have been, as a result, being part of a big journey, a great journey. So I think continuing to remind yourself about your talent, your ability, and just, the ability to stay positive. That's been the most helpful part of my life.
I love it. Well, we're going to surf away from this episode. That was an awesome insights, Gilwoo. Thank you for sharing all of that, sharing of who you are. Folks, we'll put links to Zordi in the description if you want to learn all about it. And we got this hard thing to remind all of you to like and subscribe, and put anything in the comments of what you thought was interesting, or what you liked, or what you would like to see more of. Gilwoo, thanks for being on this episode.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We'll see you in the next one, folks. Take care.